whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere ake nei, time to pin down the Delta tail as the call goes out to all Level 3 workers. Get a COVID test, actually get two at least 5 days apart, symptoms or no symptoms. The Super City's vaccination rates slowed down ahead of next week's alert level review. As our government gears up for a home isolation trial, South Australia has been there, done that. We talked to one participant about facial recognition and random phone checks. About now, Kiwis are piling into the virtual MIQ lobby, hoping to win the lottery. We'll talk to some hopefuls. And Auckland children have basically been locked down for weeks and weeks. We hit the streets to find out what they're up to, from a safe distance, of course.
Ahia Himarie, RNZ News at 5. Ko Sarah Thompson tōko ingoa. Thousands more Aucklanders are being asked to get tested for COVID-19 as health authorities try to stamp out the Delta outbreak. People back at work under Alert Level 3 in the hospitality, retail and construction sectors are the focus of the latest surveillance testing efforts. Sarah Robson reports.
Over the last month, about 50,000 essential workers have been swabbed as part of the ongoing efforts to rule out further spread of COVID-19. With more people back at work under the eased lockdown restrictions, Director General of Health Ashley Bloomfield wants to extend that surveillance testing. He's asking those permitted workers to get two tests 5 days apart over the next fortnight. Workers who don't have symptoms who are swabbed as part of the surveillance testing won't have to self-isolate until they get their result.
There are 8 new cases of COVID-19 in the community today. A wastewater test in Tauranga has also been detected from September 23rd, and a further test result was taken today and is due back on Thursday. People who need to move out of Auckland permanently will be able to do so under Alert Level 3, but they will have to follow strict rules. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says from midnight tonight, people will be able to move across the boundary if they are relocating permanently. That includes people who have bought or rented a property, are starting a new job, or need to get to a hall of residence for tertiary study. People who are returning home to an Alert Level 2 area or have shared caregiving arrangements will also be covered. People will need to have a negative test before they leave, provide proof of their reason for leaving and not be sick. The Prime Minister says she has confidence that police can deal with a planned anti-lockdown protest in Auckland this weekend, led by Brian Tamaki. The Destiny Church leader has a virtual meeting with the Police Commissioner Andrew Costa and Deputy Commissioner Wally Homaha to discuss the future action. Police have now released a follow-up letter sent by Mr Costa discussing the protest and warning of potential enforcement. Jacinda Ardern says she needs to leave police to do their job.
And I have confidence in them to deal with every compliance issue they face with, right judgment, because there are judgment calls in all of this.
Jacinda Ardern says no one wants lockdowns or restrictions to last longer than needed. 13 police officers self-isolating after an arrested woman tested positive for COVID-19 have returned initial negative results. The custody unit at Waitakere Station was closed after corrections notified the positive case on Sunday. It reopened last night after being deep cleaned. 7 people who were in custody at the time have also returned negative COVID-19 tests. All custody unit staff are being tested as a precaution. An investigation into why some of the police officers were not wearing full personal protective equipment when they arrested the woman continues. 11 officers were incorrectly wearing their masks, contravening requirements to wear full protective gear during an arrest. Property investors say rents may rise as a result of new tax changes for the sector. The government has clarified that new houses will be exempt for 20 years from changed tax rules that prevent residential property investors from deducting interest payments as an expense. The policy to stop investors claiming a tax deduction will be phased in over 4 years for properties bought before March this year. Property Investors Federation Chief Executive Sharon Kollick says investors caught out by the change may look to raise rents.
So it does mean that property investors do have to try and get that money back somehow. And of course, we would get it back from our customers, and our customers are tenants, which means that rents really have been going up since this announcement. but I'm guessing that rents will probably still keep going up just to help pay for this.
Sharon Colwick says the policy should encourage the construction of new properties. It's 5:04. Moving into sports news, Auckland's Mount Smart Stadium has been confirmed as the home ground for Moana Pacifica's Super Rugby team, jointly using it with NRL's Warriors. Moana Pacifica's Sir Brian Williams says while they've committed to be based in New Zealand for the foreseeable future, the intention is to play games in Samoa and Tonga. Sir Brian says it's appropriate the side is starting out at Mount Smart, just as the Warriors did in 1995, and it means many of the Moana Pacifica supporters who live in South Auckland will know the venue well. He says having training facilities there too means longer term the two codes will be able to share resources.
Great animosity that used to exist between the codes is long gone. And dare I say it, Pacifica players right through both games. And that has also helped the easing of animosity that used to exist.
The Phoenix captain, Stephen Taylor, says the reality of another season based in Australia is behind his shock retirement. Just a few days after he was named captain, Taylor's announced he's returning home to England. Taylor, who spent 13 seasons in the English Premier League, says having been in lockdowns or competition bubbles for a prolonged period, the thought of relocating to Australia for the entire season forced the decision. And finally, October's Auckland Marathon has been postponed until January because of the COVID outbreak in the city. And that is your news and sport.
Act on the rise.
It's a very encouraging result for the centre-right and for New Zealand. It puts us on track not only for a change of government but a change of direction.
Business leaders to skip MIQ.
We've had lots of businesses contacting us several months now wanting to be part of this. Frustration's been building.
And Moulin Rouge hits the high notes.
It was by far the splashiest, jazziest and most popular show.
Come what may, Morning Report weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
Te reo irirangi o Aotearoa, funded through New Zealand On Air. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Rāapa Wednesday. Northland south to Waitomo, Taumaranui, Taupo and Bay of Plenty. Scattered showers, some possibly heavy and thundery with hail in Taupo and Bay of Plenty until evening. Taranaki and Taihape to Manawatu, also Gisborne and Wairarapa. Mainly fine, remaining rain or showers with snow to 700 metres about Taihape and inland Manawatu clearing this evening. A few showers returning to the west tomorrow morning. Horowhenua, Kapiti, Wellington, Nelson and Marlborough, fine today with cloudy periods tomorrow and a few showers developing about Nelson and north of Wellington in the evening. Bulla to Fiordland, showers spreading north today, becoming rain for a time tomorrow. Canterbury to Southland, mainly fine with isolated showers today. Showers becoming widespread tomorrow afternoon. And for the Chatham Islands, rain turning to showers late tonight, possibly heavy, and then clearing tomorrow afternoon. That concludes the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Rāapa Wednesday. It's 5:07.
Nā mihi Sarah, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The government's issued a new plea to Aucklanders as the tale of Delta continues to bear down on the city of sales. It's asking all people working in level 3 businesses to get a COVID test, at least 2 in the next 2 weeks. There are 8 new cases in the community today and Aucklanders will have to wait until next Monday to find out if they'll drop down in alert level. Our reporter Nick Truebridge joins me now from Bayswater in Auckland. Nick, what's the deal with the new testing push?
Yeah, Lisa, well, for those who are interested, it's targeting the people who work in hospitality, those people who work in construction and those people who work in retail as well. And those people might be driving home right now, they might be listening to the show and they might be wondering, why on earth do I have to go and get 2 tests 5 days apart over the next 2 weeks? Well, this is about casting a wide net. This is about surveillance testing. This is about making sure there are no cases that have slipped through the cracks, so to speak. And 500,000 Aucklanders went back to work at level 3. So if everyone sticks to those guidelines, well, we could see 1 million cases in the next 2 weeks. Let's see how Aucklanders go. Let's see if they take it up and do it.
Yeah, so potentially 1 million tests, as you say there. Now, what did the Prime Minister also say about Auckland vaccination rates?
Yeah, well, it wasn't great news on that today, Lisa. In the Auckland metro area, there were just over 15,000 vaccinations yesterday. Now, that might sound bad, but the even worse news is that just 4,000 of those were for the first dose. And that, of course, means the PM has said that 90% is the goal for Auckland before that level announcement on next Monday. She's now, though, appeared to indicate that getting to that target might be a tough ask.
For me, it's what our total vaccination rates are looking like, and around the 77% mark for first dose. You know, it's really encouraging, and the booking suggests that we have the ability to get to that 80%, but we know that last 10's really, really tough. And what I just remind everyone is that what matters is what our total population looks like in terms of the percentage that are vaccinated. And so because our children can't be vaccinated, even at 90%, you end up somewhere around 75% of your population vaccinated. So quarter not. And so that's why it's not enough just to say, well, give everyone a chance to be vaccinated. If I'm vaccinated, I'll be fine. When 25% of your population isn't vaccinated, that does require management to ensure that outbreaks don't impact your health system and don't impact people like children. So that's why those high numbers really matter. So on that, I'm pleased that we're seeing it continue to tick up. In Auckland, we're sitting around the 82% mark. It's getting harder. And so every effort's required, which is why we keep imploring everyone to join those efforts, particularly employers.
So, Te Piramia, Jacinda Ardern there. And Nick, Aucklanders aren't the only ones who are being encouraged to get off their butts and go get a test. What's the deal with Tauranga?
Yeah, well, unfortunate news coming out of Tauranga this afternoon as well, Lisa. ESR results finding traces of COVID in the wastewater. Now, those results came back after testing was taken on September 23. There's going to be some follow-up testing over the next, day or so. It's probably going on at the moment, actually, in Bay of Plenty and wider Waikato. Results expected back on Thursday. But as a precaution, those with symptoms and those who have been to places of interest are asked to go and get a test. Now, testing stations in Tauranga will be having extended hours tonight. There will also be a number of pop-up testing stations in locations in and around Tauranga over the next couple of days. You can go online onto the Health Point website to find out exactly where those pop-ups are.
Thanks, Nick. That is Nick Trowbridge live from Auckland's North Shore. It is 12 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora rawatu mo te whakarongo mai e haere ake nei. Coming up, we take a look at South Australia's home isolation pilot, complete with facial recognition technology and random phone checks. Well, about now, thousands of Kiwis are jamming into the virtual MIQ lobby for the next lottery of vouchers. 3,800 rooms in managed isolation for October, November and December are being released at 6 p.m. It's the second room allocation since the government introduced the new system, where people are randomly placed in a queue, apparently giving everyone the same chance of securing a spot. But the last voucher offer was massively oversubscribed, with 25,000 people in the lobby at any one time, vying for just over 3,000 rooms. Henry Perenara's NRL career took him to Australia 20 years ago, and he's been a ref for the last 13. But the NRL season's almost done. A heart condition and other factors has seen Henry call time on his offshore career, and now he and his son need to get home to other family. And Henry joins us now. Kia ora, Henry. Have you made it into the lobby?
Yeah, kia ora. Thank you for having me. I'm in the lobby, but yeah, like you said before, it was massively overestimated, and I'm not very hopeful. But in saying that, I'm pretty realistic. I mean, I've been in Australia for over 20 years now, and whilst I do want to get home, I understand the circumstances around the way things are at the moment.
So you're not particularly hopeful. Did you pop into the lobby last time?
Yeah. I jumped in probably 10 minutes after it started. I think it started at 9 a.m. which is obviously 7 a.m. over here, and I had a bit of a sleep in, and I jumped on, and I think they said 5,000 rooms, and I was like number 12,000 or something, so I just gave up pretty quickly in that sense. But yeah, like I said, it's disappointing and it's hard, and there's a lot of things that are very difficult on both sides of the Tasman, but kind of just got to roll with what we've got.
So you're in Sydney at the moment, right? So no red flights in December. So you've got even more limited options. Not only are you in the lottery for an MIQ spot, but you've got limited months that you could actually even get home if you wanted to, if you get a spot.
Yeah, that's exactly how, basically what you said. And the tricky thing around it is the availability on both sides, both getting a flight and then obviously trying to get a room. I mean, I done MIQ last year to come home. I was lucky enough to come home for 3 months, but obviously, looking to actually move back home, trying to get a room is, quite difficult at this stage.
How keen are you to get back home?
Yeah, absolutely. I was very lucky to come home in June. I've got 4 young children there that I'm dying to see. I've missed a couple of birthdays and I'm going to miss another one coming up. But I haven't, I've been here since 2000 and I haven't missed one Christmas. I've been home every Christmas, and I think the realization that I may have to have a Christmas here is slowly starting to dawn on me. But obviously the COVID situation is very dynamic and it changes very dramatically. So hopefully if things change, we might be able to, fingers crossed, get back there.
What do you think of the system, this so-called lottery?
I think it's difficult. I'm not one to turn around and provide my opinion on things because everybody is in completely difficult and trying circumstances, like I said, on both sides of the Tasman. I've been here for 20 years, so I've made my home here. So I've got kind of that to lean on. But I guess the people that, I was just reading about people that, organised the charter plane from New Zealand and Australia. People are stuck on both sides of the Tasman when they were, only expected to come back or go on holiday for, a week, 2 weeks at the most. And, people are stuck there. I know my brother's got a daughter in Brisbane, and I was in New Zealand at the time, and New Zealand shut the border on the Saturday night and she was due to fly in on the Sunday morning. And she's obviously pretty stuck too. So, people are, have different situations all across, both sides of the Tasman. And I guess I'm pretty lucky, but also pretty realistic in the sense that, yes, it's not ideal, but, people are just trying to do their best with what they've got.
Best of luck, Henry. We'll check back with you later after the vouchers start getting handed out. That's Henry Perenara, who's in the MIQ virtual lottery, and I suspect he's got quite a lot of company in there. We will check back with him after 6. It is 16 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It's the battle of the border blueprints. Opposition parties are this week setting out how they would manage the border, although one got there first. Both want vaccinated New Zealanders to be able to travel freely by the end of the year. It comes off the back of the latest political poll, which shows ACT leader David Seymour has overtaken National's Judith Collins in the preferred Prime Minister rankings. Here's political reporter Katie Scotcher.
Former Prime Minister Sir John Key has kicked off a flurry of discussion about the future of the border. And out of the blue, ACT leader David Seymour has waded into the debate too, releasing a brief life after lockdown policy document.
We cannot continue eradication. There will be higher rates of COVID in New Zealand at some point in the future, whatever strategy we adopt.
David Seymour wants the government to ditch lockdowns and focus on isolating individuals instead, like the medically vulnerable and recent arrivals. He also wants the border to start reopening from November, once he says everyone has had a chance to be vaccinated. ACT's proposal comes on the eve of the release of National's COVID-19 border plan, although David Seymour insists he wasn't trying to steal National's thunder.
We've been working on this for around a month. There's only so many days in a week, and we've put out a policy because we think it's our duty to hear from people and propose better ideas.
National stuck with its plan to release its border blueprint tomorrow, with leader Judith Collins today announcing the announcement.
It will be the most complete, comprehensive and well-researched blueprint to immediately address the significant issues within the government's lack of planning around managing the COVID response and reconnecting New Zealand with the world.
National is refusing to share details about its plans to reconnect with the world until tomorrow, but MP Chris Bishop has signalled the party wants New Zealanders to be able to travel freely in and out of the country by Christmas.
I think it would be fair to say that if you're a double vaccinated Kiwi offshore or a double vaccinated Kiwi in New Zealand, you will like our plan.
The battle over the border blueprints follows the latest political poll, which shows David Seymour has overtaken Judith Collins in the preferred Prime Minister stakes. The One News Colmar Brunton poll shows Mr Seymour has 11% support, while Ms Collins dropped to 5%, her lowest result since becoming leader. Ms Collins, however, is still confident she'll be elected Prime Minister in 2023.
I have had a very successful career so far, defying expectations.
Support for the ACT Party has also shot up, increasing by 5 percentage points to 14%. Those numbers would see the party bring in 18 MPs, and who is ranked 18 on ACT's list? Another David Seymour, double Davids.
It's a bit of a new territory for democracy. I don't think any party in a Western Parliament has ever experimented with two David Seymours. But if we had achieved that, I think it could have been possibly the biggest moment for New Zealand since Ernest Rutherford split the atom.
Support for both major political parties has dropped slightly during the Delta outbreak. Labour and National have both dropped 3 percentage points, sitting at 43% and 26% respectively.
Well, homai o whakaro, we'd love your feedback. Nō reira anei na kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. Are you in the MIQ lobby? Text us, we'd love to hear from you. And also, what do you reckon? Should double vaccinated Kiwis be allowed to travel home freely before Christmas? And with what kind of rules or restrictions? Pātui mai, text me 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. More people will soon be able to leave Auckland under Alert Level 3 and into Level 2 territory. The government announced today that from 11:59pm tonight, more reasons will be added to the permitted travel list. Until now, those crossing the boundary have been limited to essential workers and for urgent cases. However, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says people's situations have changed over the last 6 weeks and their need to leave Auckland has become more urgent.
People have been able to delay moving house for only so long, for example, or starting a new job or continuing with their tertiary education. Many people intend or need to leave Auckland permanently, or part of their life, such as their child, is across the boundary and they may have share care arrangements.
However, those people will need to follow certain rules.
First, if you're leaving Auckland and not returning, you need to get a negative test within 72 hours before your departure. So that's the same as the requirements for those where it is already a permitted activity to move across the border. For those crossing the boundary for shared caregiving arrangements, because this involves more back and forth travel than a one-off, they'll need to have a test within 7 days of each crossing, just like the crossing requirements we have for those who are moving freight or are part of essential work. Everyone must carry proof of why they are travelling, and you must not be sick when you travel.
Te Piramia Jacinda Ardern says students should speak to their accommodation provider beforehand to help facilitate their return. She says the increased flexibility on leaving the boundary is because Level 3 is working. However, the government will continue to monitor the situation. Meanwhile, a pause on the housing market during the latest lockdowns is unlikely to be enough to increase affordability. Latest figures show in the year to August, all major centres saw house prices rise, with median values in some suburbs like Auckland's Ponsonby increasing by close to $600,000. But with uncertainty around what activity will look like over the coming months, real estate agents have snapped up more than $1 million in wage subsidies. Nita Blake-Person reports.
Data from CoreLogic doesn't quite cover the latest lockdown, but it paints a pretty clear picture of where prices were headed before things stalled. In the year to August, 771 of the country's 983 suburbs saw median increases of $100,000 or more, and only 24 saw increases of less than $50,000. CoreLogic's head of research, Nick Goodall, says activity dropped right off during lockdown, but it could be about to bounce back.
Because there's limited supply, we do have strong demand, and that can be boosted by people who are sitting at home and locked down and want some more space or want to move to a different area, and they can start to look for property once they come out of lockdown as well. So that can be a short-term boost to demand, short-term drop in supply, and that can mean you see a little bit of support for prices. But as I said, we don't expect that to be long-term, so over the longer term we'd expect that to peter out and the market prior to lockdown continue on. Ponsonby saw the biggest jump in median value with a gain of $597,000. Te Anau was the only suburb to record a growth rate of less than 5%. Its median value is $554,000. Goodall says he's not expecting prices to skyrocket to the dizzying heights they did after last year's lockdown. I think this time around it's not quite as bad. Last year was, the first time we'd ever seen something like this. So many people would have been considerate of their income, might have been impacted in the short term or long term, and so they may have held off from making a big purchase like a house. Whereas this time around, I think many people would see it as a short-term lockdown. They'll probably know if they've got job security or not, and it should put them off in general, but it may just push back some transactions because they're unable to transact as opposed to being unwilling to. Property commentator Ashley Church agrees a huge flurry of activity is unlikely, but he doesn't expect the market to cool either.
Already the indications are that the market's continuing to be strong, house prices are increasing week on week, and there's nothing to suggest that anything will change that. The one thing we can probably predict with some level of confidence is that we won't see that really, really big burst of sort of 30+% increase that we saw last year. Despite that strong activity, there has been some nervousness from real estate agents about what the future will bring. Agencies across the country have claimed more than $1.3 million in wage subsidies, although the bigger outfits like Barfoot and Thompson have decided not to this time around. Property Brokers is one of the largest claimants. It says the future is uncertain and the subsidy can't be claimed retrospectively, and it remains open to returning the subsidy. Ashley Church says many agencies will be competing for houses to sell. So remember, there's two sides to selling real estate. One of them is selling, but the other side is gaining listings in the first instance, and in order to be successful you really need to be doing both well. So you need to be getting people who are prepared to list their property with you, and then you need to be able to sell that property. At the moment, because listings are so short, it's generally the better salespeople who are actually getting those listings. And if you're not getting listings, essentially 50% of your income's being cut out. It's not just prices that the housing market affects, but access and equality too. Social housing advocate and policy designer Jade Kake says government interventions to limit the spiralling prices are too slow and too late, and she expects the housing waitlist will grow again after this lockdown lifts.
It's quite sobering when you look at the figures year on year or quarter on quarter and just see that persistent increase, and it's not evenly felt. So I think around 50% of the housing waitlist are Māori, despite only being 15-16% of the population, and I'm sure an equally or disproportionate amount are also Pacifica. She says lockdowns have highlighted issues around grossly unaffordable and inappropriate housing and wants tighter regulations of the rental market.
For parents and children in Auckland, it's been a juggling act of homeschooling and working from home for the last 6 weeks. And as school holidays begin next Monday, children will spend nearly 9 weeks at home all up, regardless of whether we move to level 2 or not. Reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi went to see how they're faring.
Skateboarding, working out or walking. Whatever these Aucklanders can do to get out of the house and into the sunshine. It's week 6 of lockdown and we're in Onehunga, where we bump into Annalise, who's out with her dad Les and their dog Lockie for a skate. She admits the novelty of lockdown is wearing off.
It's sort of fun and it's sort of boring because now I kind of want to go back to school because I don't really have any activities to do. Every day is similar. I always just go on my laptop or something. Sometimes we'd go for a skate, we'd go for a walk because Loki needs to go for a walk.
Dad Les says as long as there's a balance, they're not stressing over schoolwork at home.
As long as she's learning something, we don't really worry about the schooling. She's at an age where it's not too important.
Lockdown's been a chance for them to find a hobby they both love.
Oh, no, just getting back into it. Like, I haven't skated for about 20 years.
And I'm learning to skate.
And she's learning.
12-year-old Darcy Armstrong is missing the excitement of his first year at intermediate.
It's been nice to hang out with my family, but I'm always missing my friends. And so that's been pretty hard, not being able to see them. And like so many activities at school have been cancelled. So I was on the ski team and we were supposed to go to Mount Ruapehu, but we completely missed out. And also school camp has been cancelled, and that just really sucks.
But he's enjoying managing his own day.
I just try to focus on my math and English for the first half of the week and then do my design and textiles, art, Japanese and all the other subjects.
His dad Conrad explains they split up their days with bike rides or walks here at Point Chevalier Beach.
So I think, you got so many things that you're balancing, with your mental state, putting up with this sort of thing. But I think if you're clever about it, it's actually quite a nice kind of grounding, centering kind of moment, really, If you can look beyond that initial kind of stress of it all.
As for the school holidays next week,
irrelevant, really. School holidays, another 2 weeks of kids being at home. It's like, well, what's the difference? I had no even idea what the dates were for the school holidays.
Janelle D'Souza is year 3 and is desperately missing her friends.
Today I had a Zoom meeting with my whole class.
And what was that like to see everyone's faces?
It felt a little bit scary at first, but then I liked it.
And what's the thing you're most looking forward to doing when you go back to school?
I want to do some math and reading and play with my friends.
When she's not doing schoolwork, her family comes to the beach for a swimming break.
I love the beach because me and my sister get to boogie board underwater.
But Mum Lorraine paints a less rosy picture.
It gets more challenging and you don't have enough of activities to keep them occupied and busy with. And you have your own stuff to deal with as well as working from home a little bit, as and when possible.
You okay?
Yeah.
This is the first time we've done it for a while.
Oh, yeah.
Tracy Yearbury and her son Floyd Morgan are just finishing their workout. They keep each other accountable, even in lockdown.
It's kind of like an excuse sometimes not to do anything more, just getting through the day. Whereas we try and take it the opposite way, that if we do this, we get more out of the rest of it.
Floyd's in year 8. While the change is frustrating, he's taking it in his stride.
Now that I'm not at school, there's no really long breaks, so I just usually like to get all my work done just right in at the start of the day, just get it all done so I don't have to worry about it later on, and then just after I finish my work, just go out for a run and get some exercise, and then I get home and have a shower and just hang out for the rest of the day.
They're all hoping it'll be good news next week so they can get back into the classroom for term 4.
And if you were listening to that piece on radio, do check it out online. We'll put the video from Marika and Louisa's story so you can check it out. Some amazing kids there. That thought. Kia ora e te iwi e haere aki nei I a checkpoint. We join some hopeful Kiwis in the MIQ lobby. And as the government prepares to give details of a limited home isolation trial for travellers, we speak to someone who's been there, done that already. And the 25-million-year-old eagle. Homai o whakaaro, we'd love to hear from you on anything you've heard on the programme tonight. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. We were hearing from some of the young people in Auckland about their, ongoing lockdown and how they've been keeping themselves occupied. Love to hear how it's been going for you. It is time now, though, for the headlines. Ko Sarah anō tēnei.
Kia ora, Lisa. RNZ News headlines. Ko Sarah Thompson, tōku ingoa. A Kiwi trying to get home from Australia says he's coming to terms with the fact he's likely to miss his first Christmas with family in 20 years as the government's new booking system for managed isolation rooms gets its second workout in the next hour. The latest release of rooms will go live at 6 p.m. with another 3,800 rooms for October, November and December available. The new system, which randomly assigns rooms, was massively oversubscribed on the first release when more than 25,000 people tried to secure 3,000 spots. Former NRL player and referee Henry Perenara, who is returning home permanently after 2 decades in Australia, has told Checkpoint he is already in the system's waiting room, but not optimistic about getting a spot. The Director-General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, is asking Aucklanders to get tested for COVID-19 as officials look to stamp out the Delta outbreak in the city. There were just 8 new community COVID cases announced today. Dr Bloomfield also says that there are just 3 active subclusters. With more people back at work under the eased lockdown restrictions, he's asking those workers to get 2 tests 5 days apart over the next fortnight. Workers who don't have symptoms who are swabbed as part of the surveillance testing will not have to self-isolate until they get their results. All of the 20 police staff and prisoners who came into contact with a COVID-19 positive woman at Waitakere Police Station at the weekend have returned negative initial results. 13 police officers are self-isolating after the woman who had been arrested tested positive. 7 people were also in custody at the time. The custody area was closed and underwent a deep clean but reopened last night. And finally, 2 people have been taken to hospital with serious injuries following an altercation in the Auckland suburb of Otahuhu. Police say it occurred between 3 people who knew each other. Those are your headlines. Our next news and sport update is at 6.
Kia ora rā, Sarah. No mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku hoa e nai ko Nona Peltier, who's here same time every day, talk business. Now, Nona, the government has put out some more details about how tighter tax rules are going to apply to the housing market. So what are the details?
Yeah, interesting. So property investors will be able to deduct some of the interest on loans used to buy new houses for the first 20 years after they first gain a code of compliance. You get that after you finish your building and it meets up all the building code and so on. Now, this is going to be regardless of whether they are the first buyer of this property or a subsequent investor. And they'll be exempt for 20 years from those changed tax rules that will stop property investors from deducting interest on loans that they use for residential properties. Now, it's part of a change that the government has brought in different policies to cool the property market and encourage new builds. And so this new policy will cover buildings, properties that get a code of compliance certificate after March 27th, 2021. Now, for the companies, for the properties that fall between the cracks, that tax deduction will be phased out over 4 years. So the head of the Property Investors Federation, Sharon Culwick, says that since the policy was first announced, some investors have already been divesting of their properties.
With a lot of our larger investors, so what they've done is not selling their whole portfolios, but they have started to trickle feed some of their properties onto the market, just to reduce it down because they know that the tax implications of this are quite significant. So they're getting themselves in a position that, over the 5 years when they slowly bring it down to nothing, that they will be fine and able to hold on to the existing properties.
And Sharon Culwick, she says that some investors who are going to be caught out by this change may raise rents to cover the bigger tax bill that they're expecting to see in the future.
No, let's talk about Kiwisaver now. And the funds are growing again after a bit of a downturn caused by COVID-19. So what kind of numbers are we talking?
All right, well, some people might remember that they're looking at their balance on their Kiwisaver fund and would have thought, it's gone down. And yes, it did. Last year, we had an $820 million overall loss. This year, we've had a gain, returns of $13.2 billion. So that's a big increase and a turnaround from last year. So a gain of $13.2 billion versus last year's $820 million loss. Now, overall, the fund has reached $81 billion. And the FMA, who prepared the report, the director of investment there, he said that it was a momentous year for Kiwisaver and that there were significant shifts also in the regulatory focus for the Kiwisaver providers. So they needed to do things like start to get on top of their fee structure. And for sure, the FMA found that fees that are being charged for funds under management have definitely increased at a much slower rate. So some people will be looking at their FMA, their Kiwisaver accounts and thinking they've done pretty well in the past year.
And Nona, what numbers have you got for us from the markets?
It's an interesting day. Look, there's been some interest. We talked about that China Evergrande Group. That's that property company that's got an unsolved debt crisis. I mean, $305 billion is a debt crisis we're talking. And also now there's been some power outages and shortages in China, which is worrying the commercial sector in terms of whether or not they can continue to produce and manufacture goods and so forth, and what effect that might have on the economy there. So our index, that's the top 50 index, it fell 0.4% today. That's a 53-point drop to 13,174. But the New Zealand dollar, it's steady at 70.2 US cents, 96.1 Australian and 51.2 pence.
Thanks, Nona. Ka kite. That is Nona Peltier with our business news. A cut-price COVID rent clause slipped into legislation at the last minute has blindsided some property managers. The amendment to the Property Law Act would mean commercial tenants won't have to pay full rent if they can't do business as usual due to COVID restrictions. Landlords can only demand a fair proportion of what's due, and both sides have to agree on that amount. Leonie Freeman's the CEO of the Property Council and joins me now. Leonie, what's the problem with this?
Well, there's a number of key issues. The first one, that this has come through without any consultation with the industry, either landlords or tenants. And what we see is that my first reaction to this is that it's a great day to be a lawyer, because all it's going to do is create a whole lot more uncertainty and litigation when we want businesses focusing on getting back to business. The second thing is that, the vast majority of landlords and tenants have already come to some agreement. So what we've effectively done is the government's created a sledgehammer to crack a nut. And, the focus really needed to be on the areas where the tenants are really vulnerable, particularly in hospitality and that sort of thing. And then what we're looking at is what does actually a fair proportion of rent mean? And it's done nothing to address ambiguity. So it doesn't mean if you're an office, for example, and you've carried on your business from home and had no impact on your income to the business, do you get rent relief? Or if you're a retail business that was shut in lockdown, but when you came back had an absolute boom in the next month or two, what's a fair proportion? And none of that's been resolved. And even here's a curious one, Lisa, is that the government itself has a large number of tenancies right throughout the country. So are they looking for rent reductions? And could this be seen as a little bit of self-interest?
So, Leonie, when you say there's been no consultation, did you ask to be included in the discussion?
Yes, we did. So we work closely with government and many of the ministers over a vast array of things, whether it's housing, development, construction, opening up the buildings, at various levels, shopping centres, all that sort of thing. We wrote to Minister Farfuli about a month ago and said, look, if you were looking at this issue, please come back to us. We're happy to work with you, like I know many of the other interested organisations did. And we received no response. And in fact, the minister in the media comments seemed to be indicating that was supporting the stance that, the landlords and tenants to sort it out amongst themselves. So this came absolutely out of nowhere. I'm just gobsmacked with it.
Are you saying that you believe the government purposely hid this from you till the last minute?
Well, we don't know anything because, have they just created it today? Because we knew nothing about it. And I've heard nothing about this despite trying to do that. And I think it actually raises a bigger issue too, which is around the sanctity of commercial contracts. Because does this mean next week the government's going to override every mortgage contract in the country to say that if you've been impacted by COVID, you don't have to pay your mortgage? Or are they going to do this with insurance payments or rates?
They say that they're offering mediation services and arbitration services. Is it unreasonable to, expect some grown adults to sit down and work out what is a fair proportion when something totally out of the blue, like a pandemic, means they can't even access their premises to do business?
Absolutely. Yeah. No. That's absolutely right. But what I'm saying, Lisa, is a lot of the industry, the vast majority of landlords and tenants have already done that. Whether they're
then this doesn't apply to them, does it, Leonie? Sorry to interrupt, but what this says, it will take effect from today. But if you've already got some kind of adjusted rent clause in your contract already, you're sweet. You just go with that. It's for the people who don't have any protection.
That's right. But you explain this to me, Lisa. If you're a business and you're an office and you've been operating and there's been no impact to your income, but you've been working from home, should you get a reduction in your rent?
Really appreciate you joining us. That is Leonie Freeman, who's the Property Council CEO. Interested in your feedback on that one. Text us on 2101. Government, introducing a fair rent clause, a fair proportion of rent for businesses affected by COVID-19, where landlords basically can't charge you the full amount. So let us know your thoughts. It is almost 5:45. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. He muriaki ina pita pita kōrero. After the news at 6, we look ahead to next week's alert level review and what it means not just for Auckland but for the rest of the country. The government's expected to release more details of its pilot home isolation scheme for business tomorrow, with a long list of companies keen to get on board. Meanwhile, across the ditch in South Australia, they've already been trialling a similar scheme for interstate arrivals, and it's now expanding to include Defence Force workers coming home from overseas. Returnees spend their 14 days isolating at a private home rather than a government-run hotel. They're tested for COVID several times, and every day are subject to multiple random checks to make sure they are where they're supposed to be. But Gary Lowe, who was one of the first home isolation guinea pigs, says there's still a lot of trust involved.
Between the hours of, say, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m, I'd probably get 3 or 4 pings via the app to actually respond within 15 minutes. And they were quite random. Sometimes they'd only be an hour apart. Other times they were 3 or 4 hours apart.
And when they ping you, what do you have to do?
Basically, it comes up on your phone, just like a social media message notification, and basically open the app. And there was a series of selectors in the app, and one of them is respond to self-check-in request. And you've got 15 minutes to do that.
How do they know it's you, though, Gary?
So you have to have geolocation services turned on your phone. Your Google location equivalent, I guess, and your phone number and your device is tagged to that account. So they know it's your account, and then there's a facial recognition scan that happens as well.
And tell us about the facial recognition scan. Was that easy enough to use?
Yeah, it was easy to use. Literally just given a picture frame analogy to locate your face within, and if you're holding it too far away, it asks you to bring it closer. If you're too close, then your face doesn't fit in the frame. And then it just, when it's in place correctly, it starts to scan up and down, whole range of colours, fancy sort of application type movements, and then when the scan's successful, it says success.
So every time it pings you, you need to respond, but you also need to do that face mapping thing, do you, to make sure it's you?
Well, that's the only way to respond, is actually do the face mapping. Yes, the facial recognition is the only way to respond. You can't send a verbal text, or there's no other way to respond. It has to be the facial recognition.
What about health assessments, Gary? While you were locked down in isolation, did you actually have any COVID tests, or do they send you any questionnaires about how you're feeling, if you've got a fever, anything like that?
Yes, well, both of those are included in the program. So part of the SA Health requirement for home isolation is that you get tested on day 1, day 5 and day 13. You are allowed to take yourself from where you're isolating. You must be in a vehicle. You must be able to drive yourself or get yourself to one of the drive-through testing stations. I'm lucky that there's one quite close to where I'm living, about 700 metres away, that's open 24 hours. So I was able to go there at my own convenience. I didn't have to make an appointment and just drive through and get tested. And then part of the app, there's also a symptom check-in requirement. So each day you do have to respond on if you're showing any of the COVID listed symptoms. And then there's also a selector there that, I have no COVID symptoms. So you've got to respond, with the appropriate response for how you're feeling.
Outside of the testing regime, were you allowed to leave the property at all for exercise or for any reason?
No, basically just to take my rubbish out to the bin. Have to wear a face mask at all times if I was outside the front door. So I literally, in my little 40 square metre one bedder that I've got, I was literally in here for 2 weeks, except for taking the rubbish out to the bin, which was quite a trip.
Are there any penalties, or what was the potential outcome if you were breaching the rules? What did they say would happen?
So I had one facial recognition where the image didn't go back in time, and I missed the 15-minute check-in. And I just had a follow-up phone call just asking, was there a reason why I missed that check-in window? So, I just had to explain that the facial recognition didn't work on that one time. And they're obviously being part of a trial, I guess the follow-up's a little different to, if it was for general use, they'd have a different follow-up.
Do you know why it didn't work?
I believe it was because, and I had another time, because I was just, I've got my cycling trainer with me, so I was doing an indoor training routine, and I think I was a bit sweaty, to be honest. And then it did happen one other time, and so I just, ceased my activity, wiped myself down, and then it took the scan, no worries. So I think on the first occasion, that's most likely what it was. So I guess in a way, because I was all covered in sweat and probably pulling a face, it was showing that it wasn't me.
And that is Gary Lowe, who was part of the home isolation trial in South Australia. If you're curious, participants were transported from the airport to the place that they were isolating at by police. If you don't check in, you get a call, as in a physical call from the police. And some of you are asking, how do they stop you having visitors? Well, it's a trust model when it comes to that. The clock is ticking down to tonight's MIQ lottery, with 3,800 rooms to be allocated from 6 this evening. It is the second one since the government changed the system. People get an hour to pile into the virtual lobby and randomly get allocated a spot in the queue. Now, last time the demand way outweighed supply, and there's likely to be thousands of disappointed people this time round as well. Poet and writer Hinemoana Baker has been on a creative New Zealand writing residency in Germany. She was there when the pandemic hit and waited to be double vaccinated before trying to get home, and then the freeze went on MIQ. Kei kona ia inaia nei. She joins me now from the MIQ lobby. Tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe, Lisa. Kia ora rā.
Tell me, this is your second time in the lobby. What do you make of the system?
Well, I mean, to be honest, it's kind of, it's distressing, and it feels a little bit humiliating to have to be kind of taking a lottery ticket to come back home. That's always there, that's always present, those feelings. In the moment, it's just very stressful. I guess we're all in a Facebook group, a lot of us, and we're all going, we're in there, 8 minutes to go, I hope everybody does well this time. So there's also this balance of getting a lot of warmth and reassurance and kind of, I guess, comradeship from the people around the world who are going through this, and also the people at home who are going through it, wanting to leave New Zealand to see loved ones and then come home again with some level of security.
Your wahine Māori, Aotearoa, is your whenua. Has this changed the way you think about home?
That's a massive question. I kind of, Yeah, I mean, shout out to Tukorehe and Otako. I'm kind of a human being at the end of the day, and so everyone in this lobby is in the same situation. If I start to sneak up on those feelings of being Maori and being essentially locked out of the country, it's kind of too much. I can't really even approach it inside myself, let alone kind of on the radio. So, yeah, the whole thing has changed my feelings massively about home, and that's a very tender part of it.
Why do you want to come home now?
My whole process here has been that I waited till I got double vaccinated to come home. Everybody else, almost everyone else I know, New Zealanders, friends over here, went home immediately, and I totally understand that. But I, for myself, I have certain health conditions. I didn't feel it was a good idea to leave without being vaccinated, and at that stage everything was so up in the air. We didn't even know whether we could come back. I mean, I have a job over here. I'm doing a PhD, and God bless Germany, they pay us to do PhDs over here. So that's my job. I'm a researcher, and I felt like it also wouldn't be responsible to kind of pitch up on the shores of New Zealand in this very scary time with no job and nowhere to live. So I took the decision to stay till I was vaccinated. And then that timing, pretty much in a perfect storm, coincided with when the MIQ booking system started breaking down, and shortly afterwards it went offline completely. So it's just been very bad luck for me. I want to see my dad, essentially. It's not a holiday for me. What I'm doing right now, I'm in the south of France with my partner, who is half French. That's a holiday. I want to come home to see my dad and potentially to stay. It's really difficult. I think other people are probably in this situation too. I don't know if I could actually survive in Aotearoa nowadays. I'm an artist on an artist's income, and prices have kind of skyrocketed since I left. So I would need to actually be there to even understand if I can actually survive there nowadays. So, but mainly I want to see my dad. He's unwell, and I mean, he's in many ways very well, but I want to see him while he remembers me, is what I'll say, yeah.
Best of luck. We will be checking back in with you. That is Hine Moana Baker, who is in the lobby hoping to get a spot in MIQ. We're picking that there are probably thousands of people in there with her, and we'll check back after 6 when they start releasing vouchers. An electric revolution is coming in public transport, and the city of Dunedin today took the first step to ensure it doesn't miss the bus. A month-long electric bus trial started in the southern city today. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown went along for the ride.
The wheels on the bus go round and round.
Everyone has a memory of riding the bus as a kid, but in the interest of ensuring the bus doesn't remain a distant memory for many, Dunedin is looking to the next generation. The GBV Enviroline 35-seater electric bus will be out on Dunedin's roads for the next month. But whenever sustainable transport is raised in Dunedin, questions about the city's hills immediately follow. GBV's Executive Vice President, Mike Parker, says there'll be no problem for the Enviroline.
Well, I think people are going to be amazed how well it does perform. Electric drive systems have a lot more torque than diesel buses, so when it comes to climbing up hills, they're actually superior. And then you get all that regenerative energy braking coming back down again, so it makes it far more efficient.
That's right. The Enviroline, which is manufactured in Aotearoa and Christchurch, actually charges itself when going down hills. The government has ordered all fossil-fuelled buses out of the public transport fleet by 2035, so this is the first step in ensuring Dunedin gets on board. But electric buses are already in use in Tamaki Makaurau and Ōtautahi, so Mr Parker is confident they'll also perform in Ōtepoti.
And obviously the slower circuits, the more start-stopping in hills, you do lose a bit of efficiency, but it's still going to do well over 300 kilometres, we suspect.
Okay. And then what's your recharge time?
With the normal recharger, it's about 4 hours to recharge it back up again. It's ready for the next day.
Right. So I mean, you could conceivably have this running 2 8-hour shifts a day and charged up in between time.
Yes, you could.
I spoke to Mike Parker while riding the Enviroline, and what you may not have noticed is the bus's noise. There is none. The silence of its operation stands in stark contrast to the fleet currently on Dunedin's roads. And as Peter Dowden, who got to drive the Enviro line on its inaugural journey round Dunedin, tells me, the lack of a combustion engine actually makes the experience better for the driver.
Oh, it's an absolute honey to drive, especially starting off. It's extremely smooth. Earlier we started on a hill and had to do quite a tight right turn, and the bus just glided around really gracefully. And you know, that is the best thing. And also the lack of vibration when you're waiting at a bus stop to load people. The lack of vibration, it just removes that fatigue and the sort of the clatter of the noise, which makes it harder to converse with the passengers.
For those concerned about the safety of pedestrians, fear not. Mr Dowden says they've thought of everything.
It doesn't rattle and rumble, so when you're coming into a stop, people will actually not notice that you're there. Yeah, right. So if you give them a little ring on the bell, then it warns them.
And for the passengers who got to experience the first trip, it ticked all the boxes. Regular bus user Connor Marshall says he's looking forward to taking more trips on the e-bus.
I think, on behalf of all the bus passengers in Dunedin, it would be brilliant for the city.
So you'd hope to see more of these?
Oh yes, definitely more of these on the roads. That would be lovely to see.
Electric vehicle owner Helen Patterson agrees.
It's nice and smooth actually. Yeah, it's not as bumpy, I don't think. It's not as jerky. Like often changing the gears, it's quite jerky in a diesel bus, but it doesn't seem to be that way. So it's good, nice and smooth.
Otago Regional Councillor Alexa Forbes says the council needs to get more people on buses and ensure they're a cleaner option. This is a start.
I think it's 47% of our carbon emissions in Otago are as a result of transport. So that figure needs to come down, and one of the greatest ways of bringing that figure down is getting people out of their private cars.
While it's only day one of the trial, it seems to be a hit. And all the passengers have the same message for the rest of Dunedin. Change is coming, so don't miss the bus.
Don't forget, send in your feedback on anything you've heard on the program. Text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. If you're waiting in the lobby at MIQ, we'd love to hear from you. More on that after 6.
Ahiahi Mārie, RNZ News at 6. Ko Sarah Thompson tōku ingoa. Pressure on Auckland retail workers to get COVID tested is meeting early resistance from employers. Workers in level 3, particularly those in construction, hospitality and retail, have been asked by the government to get 2 tests at least 5 days apart over the next 2 weeks, regardless of symptoms. The Chief Executive of Retail New Zealand, Greg Hartford, says it's too much to ask.
If it's really important to be maintaining surveillance testing of retail workers at level 3, then really we think the government needs to roll out low-impact saliva testing that can be done in the workplace rather than expecting workers to travel to testing centres that are open limited hours and expecting employers to pay for that.
Greg Hartford says retail workers are already stressed about working during level 3 and higher levels of abuse from customers. The COVID-19 response minister, Chris Hipkins, says it's completely false that the government could have paid extra for early access to vaccines. Earlier in the week, former Prime Minister John Key claimed that New Zealand could have paid $40 million to vaccine maker Pfizer to get doses quicker. During Parliament's question time today, Mr Hipkins rejected that claim.
I simply refer everybody to the statements made by Pfizer that New Zealand has never been offered the opportunity to get extra earlier access to vaccines. Pfizer have been operating a global allocation model to ensure that countries have equitable access to vaccines.
Chris Hipkins says Pfizer have worked constructively with the New Zealand government to supply vaccines as quickly as possible. Thousands of Kiwis are jamming into a virtual MIQ lobby for the next lottery of vouchers. 3,800 rooms in managed isolation for October, November and December were released at 6 p.m. The new system, which randomly assigns rooms, was massively oversubscribed on the first release when more than 25,000 people tried to secure 3,000 spots. Former NRL player and referee Henry Pedinara is looking to return home from Australia. He has told Checkpoint he's not hopeful about securing a spot after what happened last time.
I jumped on and I think they said 5,000 rooms and I was like number 12,000 or something. So I just gave up pretty quickly in that sense. But yeah, like I said, it's disappointing.
Henry Perenara says many people are in trying circumstances on both sides of the Tasman. It's been revealed the Trade Minister, Damien O'Connor, is heading overseas this week to discuss trade in the United States, United Kingdom and possibly Belgium. His trip was made public by the acting US Ambassador, Kevin Covitt, who posted a photo on Twitter with the minister captioned that he met Mr O'Connor on the eve of his trip to Washington, D.C. Damien O'Connor says he was not being secretive about his trip.
At this stage, it's probably later this week, but details yet to be finalised. I will be making an announcement before I go. There's nothing secret here, but we do have to respect those people who we want to meet with, that we agree to those meetings before we go out and make any announcements.
The New Zealand and UK government had previously missed the August deadline for a fair trade agreement, but Mr O'Connor says he is confident such a deal can still be struck. Property investors say new details on how tax rules will be applied gives the sector much needed certainty. The government has clarified that new houses will be exempt for 20 years from changed tax rules that prevent residential property investors from deducting interest payments as an expense. It's part of a suite of government measures to cool the housing market. Property Investors Federation Chief Executive Sharon Colwick says its members have been waiting for the details.
There may still be changes, they have said though, but at least the design is out. So at least people now can start getting financial advice and find out, okay, how is this actually going to affect me? And then they can make any changes that they need to make sure that they can hold on to whatever properties they've got in the future.
Sharon Colwick says a downside is that investors may look to raise rents to cover their bigger tax bill. It's 6:04. The Ford Motor Company has announced an investment of more than $16 billion as part of its transition to the mass production of electric vehicles. The company will build 2 new factories to make electric vehicles and batteries. The BBC's Samira Hussain has the details.
Ford's plans represent a major part of its transition to the mass production of electric vehicles. One of the planned new factories outside Memphis, Tennessee, will produce the electric version of its F-150 pickup truck, which for 40 years has been the biggest selling auto in the United States. The success of the electric version, which will hit the roads next year, could be key to Ford's future. The automaker predicts that by 2030, between 40 and 50% of its global vehicle output will be electric.
And moving now into sports news. The All Blacks are back in quarantine in their hotel in Queensland. Authorities are trying to contain a potential COVID-19 outbreak in the Brisbane region, which has led to restrictions for the side. First 5, Richie Mo'unga has joined the team from managed isolation, having initially remained at home for the birth of his second child. Assistant coach Scott McLeod says Mo'unga is available for selection against South Africa on Saturday.
He's been inside for 2 weeks. He's been working hard. But we just need to have a look at him on the training field and just assess where he's at and what's best for the team.
4-time Olympic gold medalist Simone Biles says she should have quit gymnastics well before the Tokyo Games. The American withdrew from her opening Games event after just 1 vault, saying she was struggling with the twisties, a mental block where gymnasts lose their sense of orientation. In an interview with New York magazine The Cut, Biles said she struggled with anxiety triggered by memories of former Team USA doctor Larry Nassar, who has been jailed for sexually abusing her and hundreds of others. Brighton have missed out on going to the top of English football's Premier League for the first time, drawing 1-1 with Crystal Palace. And finally, Emma Raducanu's outfit from her US Open tennis campaign will be displayed at the Tennis Hall of Fame after the 18-year-old Briton became the first qualifier to win a Grand Slam. And that is your news and sport.
Tonight on Nights, Tony Stamp samples the new album from New Zealand-born, London-based neo-soul adventurer Jordan Rake. We've got the final episode of Bad Cops, the story of a Baltimore gun control squad that went feral. Now they're in jail. Question is, are there still other cops out there just as bad as them? And then there's our after-dinner speaker Eric Crampton with a libertarian viewpoint on our current approach to COVID-19. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Te reo irirangi o Aotearoa, on air, online and on demand. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Apa Wednesday. Northland south to Waitomo, Taumaranui, Taupo and Bay of Plenty. Scattered showers, some possibly heavy and thundery with hail in Taupo and Bay of Plenty until evening. Taranaki and Taihape to Manawatu, also Gisborne to Wairarapa. Mainly fine, remaining rain or showers with snow to 700 metres about Taihape and inland Manawatu, clearing this evening. A few showers returning to the west tomorrow morning. Horowhenua, Kapiti, Wellington, Nelson and Marlborough. Fine tonight, cloudy periods tomorrow with a few showers developing about Nelson and north of Wellington in the evening. Bulla to Fiordland will see showers spreading north today, becoming rain for a time tomorrow. Canterbury to Southland will be mainly fine with isolated showers this evening, showers becoming widespread tomorrow afternoon. And for the Chatham Islands, rain turning to showers late tonight, possibly becoming heavy and then clearing tomorrow afternoon. That concludes the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Apa Wednesday. It's 8 minutes past 6.
No mai, hoki mai. This is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Kiwis desperately hoping for a ticket home are now having to go through the latest release of MIQ rooms. 3,800 rooms are up for grabs. They're in October, November and December. The lobby or the virtual waiting room opened just over an hour ago and thousands of expats poured in. When the clock struck 6, all those people were given a randomised number. Let's go back to Henry Perenara, who's been working in Sydney as an NRL ref and is trying to get home now that the season is over. Tēnā koe, Henry. How are you faring?
I'm going okay, thanks.
What's your number?
So how many rooms did you say was available? 3,800?
You got it.
Yeah, okay. I'm 18,875 in the queue. So I think it's fair to say I won't be getting one of these 3,800, which is unfortunate, but here's hoping the people that desperately need it get home and see their families.
When the number flashed up, Henry, what did you think?
I was just going to turn it straight off. Absolutely. I mean, it's difficult, it's tough, it's every single one of those things that you guys and everybody else are talking about. But at the end of the day, we've got, we can only do so much, and it's difficult and unfortunate, but I can't do much about it.
Henry, we're hearing there's about, another 6,000 plus behind you, so you're not got the highest number. Where does that leave you now?
Yeah, you know what? The realisation that Christmas will probably be in Sydney is a very real possibility. I'm just hopeful that maybe vaccinations or rates go down. New South Wales are very, very high in terms of what level of vaccination rates are up to. I mean, I'm double vaccinated, fully vaccinated, if that's what you call it. So, with a bit of luck, they might open the bubble. But I guess that's probably my only slim hope, that the Trans-Tasman bubble, where we don't need a quarantine, opens up prior to Christmas and, flights start to flow. But like I said, it's a very, very hopeful, optimistic view at this stage.
Thanks for sharing your experience, Henry. That's Henry Perenara. As you heard there, there's thousands and thousands of people back in the queue. And poet and writer Hinemoana Baker she's been studying in Germany and she wants to come home and see her dad, who's not that well. And she is also in the MIQ lobby. Tēnā koe, Hinemoana. How are you going? What number did you draw?
Tēnā koe, Lisa. This time I drew 10,765. So I won't be coming home either anytime soon.
Yeah, and when you saw that number, what kind of went through your head? How are you feeling about it?
Well, I was already crying before it turned up. I'm a bit of a tangiwiko. But it's just because you read all the stories of everybody else as well. So at least, I guess the good thing is that there are 3,800 people who will be coming home, or 3,800 rooms that will be filled with people who really, really need them in very dire circumstances. So, yeah.
Hinemoana, kōrero mai, talk to me about all that energy that you have. You go into that lobby for an hour, right? You wait. There's pressure, anticipation and hope. Talk to me about that. Yeah. And then you get this number. Talk me through it.
Yeah. Well, thing that keeps me going personally through it is knowing that there are, thousands, tens of thousands of other people going through it. So initially, when all of the difficulties with MIQ started, it was kind of a harder time because you felt a little bit like you were crazy, the responses were always, it's working fine, there's nothing we need to change. But now at least we know that there are many things that aren't working fine and that things need to be changed. And we have people that we can talk to about that. So in the moments, as the lobby opens and in those 60 minutes while we're waiting for it, we talk to each other and you learn all of the circumstances that people are going through. People with family members who are very, mortally ill, and unfortunately their family member might die, and then they can't qualify for an emergency place anymore. It's kind of inhumane. At the same time, it reminds that you're just one of many, and in your circumstances, my circumstances are actually really, really comfortable compared to many people in the world. So I guess in that 60 minutes, that's our time to touch base with each other. And then when the number comes up, you just see in the Facebook group thousands of, hundreds of people posting their numbers going, oh yeah, I'm number 21,000, just like our mate who you were talking to just then. Oh, I'm number 18,000, I'm number 7,000. And every now and then you'll get someone who goes, I got 2,412, and then everyone piles on with their hearts and their likes and everything because they're really behind people who are finally going to get a chance to go home. So yeah, that's how the hour ticks over, and that's how the moment passes for me.
Hene Moana, what now, do you think? You have another crack?
Well, last time when I did it, I was kind of destroyed at the end of it. So I thought, I'm never going to do this again. But 2 weeks passed, and my lovely friends and fat whānau are very supportive, and so I gave it another go. And every time I do it, it kind of gets a little bit less difficult. And my skin is a lot thicker than it was in March 2020. So. So I guess I will try again, because the fact is, if I don't and something happens to my dad, I don't think I could handle it. So yeah, I'll be back in.
Nā mihi mō te rā. Thank you for joining us. That is Hene Moana Baker, who, wow, she drew a high number as well. Missed out on the MIQ voucher handout allocation. And we're hearing that there's potentially in excess of around 26,000 people crammed into that lobby. It is 6:15. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. There's a lot riding on this Monday's COVID level announcement, and not just for Aucklanders desperate to get back to life as normal. A shift down to level 2 for the country's biggest city could also mean a drop to level 1 for everyone else, opening the door to events with no restrictions on crowd numbers. As Conan Young reports, in Christchurch, it would allow Cup and Show Week to happen and help to fill some coffers left very empty by lockdown.
The cup field is set, tapes are back, they're underway.
The biggest week on the Christchurch social calendar starts on November the 9th with the New Zealand Trotting Cup, then the Gallops at Riccarton and the Canterbury A&P show, bringing in a whopping $30 million to the local economy. But at level 2, none of that can happen, at least not with a crowd looking on. Addington Raceway's Darren Williams can't afford to wait for Monday's 4 p.m. briefing and has already set in place plans for 8 different scenarios that might play out.
From full cup, as we were planning to do, to level 2 with pods of 100, and then everything that we can imagine might be workable in between.
With the highest turnover of any race in the country, Mr Williams says Cup Day is this country's equivalent of the Melbourne Cup.
We have around 900 staff on Cup Day, from gate staff to chefs to kitchen hands to bartenders. They actually look forward to working Cup Day because it's part of a tradition in Canterbury that everyone's very, very proud of.
Tickets were supposed to go on sale on Friday, but as of today, all sales have been halted until the Prime Minister makes her announcement on Monday.
The government's decided that is the best way to operate with COVID at the moment and try and stamp it out. I guess the frustration that we've been so long in the South Island without a positive makes things frustrating.
The president of Hospitality New Zealand's Canterbury branch, Peter Morrison, says the ripples of Cup and Show Week are felt widely.
I like to call it the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. Everyone gets more business because of Cup Week. You know, the taxi driver that picks people up from the airport, the service station that he gets his gas from, the hydroponic lettuce grower in Hallsville that supplies the restaurants.
For many of his members, this is the last chance to bring in some much-needed money, and cancelling could be the final straw, resulting in some having to close for good.
We should be back to level 1 in the South Island. It's ridiculous. We haven't even got a proper plan on vaccinations. What level are we going to be at before they will open borders and all that?
COVID last year forced the scrapping of Canterbury's AMP show for the first time since World War II. But director Jeff Bone says at this stage it's all go to hold it in November, as long as the city moves down to level 1.
You just have to wake up in the morning and put a positive mind frame on it. So we are positive and focused until we can't be.
But with money already spent on holding the show, they'll face a huge financial hit if it has to be cancelled.
We don't divulge that stuff, but really is significant. And so we are certainly looking to try and make this work.
Cup Day organisers need a shift down to level 1 within 2 weeks of Monday's announcement. Otherwise, crowds will be shut out from attending for the first time in its 117-year history. For the AMP show, a continuation of level 2 through to November will result in it being cancelled for just the second time since World War II.
Tourism has been one of the most disrupted industries during the pandemic, with frequent restrictions and lockdowns. Regional New South Wales will finally welcome back fully vaccinated Sydney-siders, most likely in late October. But there could be a hitch. The sector's lost a big number of trained workers it relies on, and it might not be easy to get them back. The ABC's David Sparks has more.
If you're in the tourism game in regional New South Wales, you rely pretty heavily on visitors from the state capital. Katie Toney runs Reflections Holiday Park in Seal Rocks on the mid-north coast.
To us here at Seal Rocks, the Sydney-Newcastle market make up most of our guests, especially during those peak times of school holidays and over summer. So to confidently be able to welcome them back is a huge relief, and it's just exciting.
Fully vaccinated Sydney residents will be allowed to leave the capital once 80% of the state has had 2 shots, a mark that'll probably be reached towards the end of next month. Katie Toney is confident she'll have enough staff when the big crowds come back.
Yeah, we will. We've been trying to give them whatever hours we could during this time. We were only closed for, not a very long time, so we still had staff on, just on reduced hours. And like I said, we were really lucky to be to have lots of local visitations. So even the weekend just gone, we were filling up really quickly. And this October long weekend, everything we lost by Sydney and Newcastle not being able to come, we've pretty much made up for in local visitations.
While some tourism businesses have been able to keep on workers, for others it's a different story. Leanne Harwood is president of the Accommodation Association of Australia.
Business was booming when it came to June and July. We were looking like we were starting to be able to get our hotels back up, and a lot of the hotels out in the regions were actually having to, even at that point in time, actually compress their occupancy levels, or unfortunately have parts of their hotels shut down because they didn't have enough staff. Then we went into lockdowns, and of course over the last 3 months we've sadly lost an awful lot of those fantastic people that have worked in our hotels. So now we're going back into the delightful time where we're going to have our hotels open back up again, and we're faced with the challenge that we just don't have enough staff in order to be able to serve our guests. And there's no silver bullet.
Staffing is also a problem in states where there are no lockdowns, because closed interstate borders have created a different sort of uncertainty. In South Australia, Craig Wickham runs a four-wheel drive tour company, Exceptional Kangaroo Island.
The tourism game is very much a skills, knowledge, experience one, and we've got an amazing team, and everyone's been really accommodating to the best they can be, but you get to a point where people need to eat, they need to find a job. So right across Australia, I think there's a lot of concern for a loss of knowledge, and I'm just concerned that some of those good people have gone on to other jobs, and we're going to have trouble finding them to replace when demand comes back. And the absence of a a firm target, it makes it that so much harder.
And some of you getting in touch about the MIQ lottery this evening. So the lobby opened from 5 till 6 and then the vouchers started being given out, I suppose, from 6 o'clock. This listener says, my 18-year-old son and girlfriend are stuck in Sydney, put both their profiles in the queue, 15,000th and 16th thousandths. They beat Henry at least. Henry Perinawa, we were talking to earlier in the program, again, he was way down the queue. Peter says, my daughter in London is up in the 26 thousands. Probably won't see her for another Christmas. And a couple of sad face emojis from Peter. And someone else has pointed out to us that on the Grounded Kiwis Facebook page, one person has drawn 35,000 as their number in the queue. On the issue of home isolation and the border, Stephen reckons if we do home isolation, how are we going to stop people isolating at home from having people visit them? And are we really going to trust them to obey the rules? I mean, I suppose so much in life is based on trust, isn't it, Stephen? But it's whether we want to risk this. Someone else says, yep, fully vaccinated Kiwis should be allowed to come home to a form of regulated home quarantine, such as that being trialled in South Australia. Another person reckons double vaccinated from Perth with negative test results should be able to come home. And Liz says, why not tag them like prisoners on parole or give them a tagged wristband like you have for a music festival? Another person's got a question about the MIQ lobby, and they say it's a serious question. Can anyone tell how many of the people who have applied for MIQ are actually in New Zealand already, but whether some of them are hoping to travel overseas in the future and therefore are booking an MIQ spot? I don't see anything that would stop them doing that, but someone else may be able to confirm or deny. You can text us on 2101. Germany's general election left no clear answer as what the next governing coalition will look like in the country's politics beyond Angela Merkel's long reign. Like New Zealand, Germany uses the MMP electoral system, so smaller parties will have a lot of power in deciding what happens next. Both main parties, the centre-left Social Democrats and the centre-right Christian Democrats, think they have a plan that could tempt minor parties to join them. The BBC's Katja Adler reports from Berlin.
If you find yourself wondering what just happened in Germany after yesterday's election, you're not alone. German voters have followed hourly news updates today, trying to get a sense of where their country's headed. These two rivals, one Social Democrat, one Conservative, each say they want to form Germany's next government. With the votes so splintered here, who'll be the first to form a stable coalition?
We have seen that the public have given us a mandate to make a serious go at driving this forward.
No party can derive a clear mandate to govern from this result, but we are convinced a government led by CDU-CSU is best for our country, and we will feel obliged to our voters.
Coalition building will be tricky. There are competing priorities between the political parties now in negotiations, including smaller parties like Germany's Greens and the business-minded FDP. But voters we spoke to today said they just want them to get on with it.
It is ridiculous. It's really ridiculous.
We still don't know who will lead our country in the next years. And I feel like the CDU should realize that we voted against them, that a lot of people at least voted against them.
All this political uncertainty might be unsettling for Germany's allies and trade partners abroad who are used to relying on German stability and predictability. But this is not about Germany imploding. The fact that Angela Merkel was Chancellor here for 16 long years was down to her. She was like a stopper in a bottle. Now she's going, a lot of those votes simply went elsewhere. This is a country used to coalition building, and in the meantime, Chancellor Merkel remains firmly in place.
A dusty lake bed in remote South Australia has yielded an amazing discovery from the past. Paleontologists have unearthed the country's oldest eagle fossil, a creature they believe soared through the skies 25 million years ago. The ABC's Rhett Burney has the story.
The wedge-tailed eagle is Australia's largest bird of prey. But when paleontologist Dr. Aaron Kamens was looking for ancient remains in a dry lake bed in remote South Australia, it was something small that caught his eye.
And I was just walking along
an outcrop where this particular layer was exposed, and there were 2 tiny little toe bones on the ground.
Dr. Kamens and his Flinders University colleagues started a careful excavation.
49 times out of 50, when you do that, you're lucky if you have any more of the bone. But in this particular instance, not only did the rest of the bone go into the ground, but there were more bones associated with it, and further digging led it to being, what is now one of the most complete eagle skeletons from that time period.
The time period, an astonishing 25 million years ago. And what they'd found was a well-preserved fossil of an eagle, a 60-piece skeleton lying in the now dry Lake Pinpa on an outback cattle station 600 kilometres north of Adelaide. The eagle has now been given a name, the Archiehyrax. Dr. Trevor Worthy runs the Paleontology lab at Flinders Uni.
Well, it's not just another species, because on the land this would have been the biggest carnivore. The other carnivores were small mammals, probably smaller than a cat. So this was the apex predator in this ecosystem.
Dr. Worthy says the raptor would have feasted on smaller animals like koalas and possums when the area around Lake Pinpa was fertile and part of a lush forest. And he says this ancient bird was smaller and leaner than the current-day wedge-tailed eagle.
The birds that live in forests where they're ducking and weaving in amongst trees and vegetation, they tend to have robust but short wings, good for flapping.
Lake Pinpa is what paleontologists call a fossil treasure trove. Earlier this year, a 25-million-year-old fossil of a tiny skink was found at the site, and several decades ago, they uncovered a wombat-like marsupial 4 times the size of the ones today. So what remains of other creatures might be preserved there? Dr. Kamens says the team has found other fossils, but for now, they're being kept a secret.
It is going to be an exciting one too. I can't tell you anything yet, but yeah, we'll be sure to be in touch.
Let's go to a last word from one listener on the home isolation trial and how it should operate here. They say home isolation house needs to have a sign outside so they are under the watchful eye of neighbours. Yeah, interesting point. Don't know how well that would work. That's all we've got time for. Don't forget the late news team will keep you updated throughout the night. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a pōpō, and tomorrow from 5 a.m. for all you early birds. First Up speaks to an Auckland moving company literally run off their feet as people make plans for a permanent shift out of the region. That's with the new, slightly relaxed rules. Kia pai tōpō.
Kia ora tātou, RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Ko Sarah Thompson tōko ingoa. Anyone in Bay of Plenty with COVID-19 symptoms is being urged to get a test after COVID-19 was detected in wastewater in Tauranga. Thousands of Kiwis are jamming into the virtual lobby for the next lottery of managed isolation vouchers, which were released at 6 p.m. The COVID-19 response minister says the government were never offered an opportunity to get early access